So we're gonna start off. Can you just say and spell your name like how you want to be credited?
Excuse me? Spell my name?
Say and spell your name. Yeah, how you want to be credited. Because some people like have like a rapper name or something. Like, how do you want to be credited?
Yeah, I'm Maestro Fresh Meteorological Wes.
How do I spell
No,
that?
Ian Black. That's my name.
How do you spell that?
Tincup. What the hell that
Tin
mean?
Cup.
Ian, Ian Black, Black.
Ian Black.
Correct.
Thank you for talking to me today.
Is this on?
Oh, we're going. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, good to talk with you as well, my friend.
Let's start off when you're a kid. Tell me about you growing up. Don't worry about the plants.
Really?
Yeah, you're good.
Sorry, tell me about where I grew up.
Tell me about you growing up. So tell me about you as a kid, how you grew up.
Great childhood, great neighborhood. Grew up, middle class. Two other brothers, a sister. I'm the baby. Did a lot of traveling. Did everything you could imagine as a kid. Traveled across Canada, the United States, camping. Just a wonderful childhood. Couldn't ask for anything better. That kind of thing. Just blessed.
Your dad was a principal or vice principal?
My dad was a air fighter in the war, and just before the war started, just before the war ended, he was posted in Britain, ready to start doing his thing, and the war ended. Mercifully, he was young, and he came back, and if you served in the war, they would give you a free education. So he became a teacher, a phys ed teacher at first, and then he became an English teacher, and then head of the English department, then vice principal, and then he became a principal. And I recall in high school, he was a principal at a high school closer to our house than the school I was going to. And so I had the privilege of, if I wanted to, go to the school that my dad was principal. I declined because you would get in trouble at school and you'd get in trouble at home. So I said, no thanks, I'll continue to bus it to my school.
So he was a bit
Can you
tougher.
imagine being sent to the principal's office? Hey, Dad, how you doing?
So you declined. You always loved weather? You're kind of known around Ottawa as the weather guy.
Yeah, I was literally born to do this job. I recall as a child sitting on the front porch with my mom, and a thunderstorm came, and we were talking about it, how neat it was, and it wasn't raining, and you could see the rain coming down our street, and then lightning and thunder. And I remember reading about that in the library, and I went to my mom, Mom, we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be sitting outside watching lightning and it just grew from there. My high school buddies tell me that I used to walk around. There used to be this thing called a newspaper. I think it's still around, but they'd have a weather map in it, and I would talk to my friends and say, hey, look at this. Do you understand what these lines are? I was a substitute teacher in my early 20s, thanks in no part to my dad knowing all the principles. And whenever I was a substitute teacher for geography, I could sit there on the board and draw a map of North America pretty well, and then I'd talk about it with the kids. What does this? I'd make a weather map. What's this H mean? What's this front with what's this line with the triangles on it? And so yeah, I was just a complete weather nerd growing up. In university, my senior honors thesis, research paper really, was an analysis of television weather segments. So I was doing a summer stint with CTV, CGOH, and they had all these tapes that, from K-Ron in San Francisco or LA, and so I'd have like 30 of these weather segments that I would then break down and analyze, and the pros and the cons. And at that time, my idea was, okay, I'm going to be a consultant. I'm going to go, because the Americans were doing a much better job in TV weather than we were. We'd tend to have people who just sort of ended up doing that, broadcasters, whereas in the States, they had meteorologists and people who knew what they were talking about. So I was going to go from station to station and consult them and say, here's what I can do for you. Here's my package. I had a little company. And I went to CTV. I spent 4 months there. And then they had just got a computer, and thankfully I went to Waterloo, so I knew computers, and I set them all up with their computer. Back in the day, we had modems, and I remember, you know what a satellite picture is, right? So it would come in one line at a time. So you didn't have like animations back. This was in the 80s, right? But I set them up with that, and then so the next station I went to was CBC, and they had just hired a person to do the weather who didn't really know anything about the weather. So I said, okay, I'll work here for a while. And I would write a 1-minute weather story every day. We'd go out, shoot it, come back, I would edit it, and then I would literally write a weather script for this person who would read it off the teleprompter, and it made the person sound great. And then about 4 months later, I said, okay, it's been great, I'm going to move on. And they said, no, you can't, no, here's more money. So they threw more money at me. And then she left. And the guy was panicking. And he said, Ian, can you do the weather? And I went, well, I'll give it a whirl. I never worked a day in my life after that. You get to do what you want to do, what you love doing. So that's not work. I used to do school visits, and I'd tell them, I'd say, find something that you love doing. If you do that, who cares how much money you get? That's irrelevant. You're doing something you love, stay in school, study, find whatever your dream is, and make it happen. Try. Several people said, no, you're no good. We're not going to. Some people said, you're great. Well, so 33 odd years later, I had a career under my belt. Time to say bye-bye.
There's a lot there, a lot, and I mean, for me, imagining you literally giving a weather report basically on a chalkboard to students before you even were a weather guy, right? You're kind of
before I was a
doing
weather
that.
guy. I was still. I think I had just graduated from university, or maybe it was in. You're out of university in April, and I think I would work. I remember I think I was 20 or 21. And I was teaching, substitute teaching, grade 13s, and I was sitting at the desk, and people come in, you do the attendance. And this guy goes, what are you doing? Are you new here? You're going to get in trouble sitting at the teacher's desk. Because I looked like a student, right? The guy had a beard, and I probably looked younger than him. And I said, I am the teacher, and he wouldn't believe me. So I said, do you want to accompany me down to the principal's office? Nope, I'm good, I believe you. So I was very young when I started doing that. It wasn't necessarily a weather report I would do, but I would, like I did in high school, I would draw a weather map and just talk to them. Do you know what this means? Do you know what all of this means? A lot of people did, a lot of people didn't. And I used that information when I got older, that you can't be too complicated when you're delivering the weather, because people don't care if something's 100.3 millibars coming out of the north. It doesn't mean anything to them. So you have to simplify it and realize that they don't really necessarily understand that a radar shows the rain. It doesn't show, a satellite shows the clouds, and it shows what has happened, not what is going to happen necessarily. So I used that just to keep it simple, And back in the day when I started, you didn't have the bells and whistles that we had. So I remember going down, I'd have to go down every day and kind of make this weather map out of nothing. I had the Chiron guy make a cold front and an H and that kind of stuff, and we'd make these really simplistic maps. And then CBC finally got a computer down in Toronto, and it was run by a producer and a technician. I didn't know anything about the weather necessarily, but I convinced them. I went down and I did this is before this was before I was the CBC weather guy. I convinced them, after I became CBC weather guy, to send that to Ottawa and I'll run it. So I was the first one to get a satellite image on CBC, the first guy to get the radar, the first guy to have all of that stuff. And it was a huge computer. This was like 89. huge computer with like a big Winchester floppy hard drive disk reading thing. And
An actual floppy disk.
yeah, huge one, the big ones, you know. And it made a lot of noise, and it was about, you know, about this, you could barely fit in the front of your car. But I used to tell all the kids, wow, you should see the video games I can play. I never played video games with them. I would say that because over time they got more sophisticated, the computers, the software. Basically, they're just data acquisition boxes with artistic design capabilities that could do animations. And then over time, it would just run off a normal PC because, you know, PCs were getting faster, the software was getting better, and it became like touch a button and you can make stuff happen. Whereas back in the day, you had to make maps, literally.
You built your own graphics.
Built my own graphics, rudimentary. You know, looking back on it, it was laughable. But I was the only guy who had it. You know, it was great. And then we went through some cutbacks 10 years after I started, and I came back from vacation and I had an envelope saying you've been declared redundant. This is like 2000, something like that. And it was a bit of a shock. And so I wrote a report saying, okay, here's what I'll do. I'll do the weather for everyone. Oh, okay, yeah, we found the money, we'll keep you. That kind of deal. So I stuck around. I was doing the weather every day. It was so crazy. I would do the weather for Ottawa, Windsor, Edmonton, Calgary, and then provide graphics for everyone else who, you know, might have an anchor, you know, read it. And I went from not working very hard, the way I liked it, to working really hard all day, like running to the bathroom, running back. But it only lasted, as I recall, it only lasted a few months. And then they changed the format again to, I think they dropped the late show, and then they said, okay, the local news will be on at 6:30, whatever. Reasoning I don't understand, but I just became Ottawa's weather guy as opposed to, and so, you know, I decided to stay because I was burning out. I was going to leave, and then I got back to just doing the local weather, which was great.
So again, I think there's so much in that, but the thing that really struck me that you started with was your mom. Being outside with your mom and watching the storms. And tell me about your mom.
My mom was a nurse who worked the graveyard shift, which don't do that. It's not healthy, it's not good. And, you know, being kids and four of us, we'd be, you know, playing basketball out in the laneway, and she'd be trying to sleep. She'd come home at 7 in the morning, you know, from 7 at night to 7 in the morning, trying to sleep, and it was just gradually killing her. But she was the person I'd talk to. Dad was the strict disciplinarian. You wait until your father comes home. No! But your mom, you know, you'd tell your mom, my mom would say, how many beers did you have last night? You know, and let's say I'd have like 6, I'd go, 2, and she'd go, oh, you didn't drive, did you? That kind of thing. She was the sweetheart, the heart, the love of the family. Dad was the disciplinarian, the financial guy, but he would take the time out of his day to, you know, play ball with you, and they did everything they could to make the 4 kids have the best childhood that they could. I mean, I've been to every province, with the exception of Newfoundland, I think. I've been in most of the states traveling with the family. That's what we did. You know, at Christmas, we'd go to Mexico by camping. My dad had a sabbatical 1 year, and we went to Victoria, BC, spent a year out there, traveling, looking, you know, the mountains, and you know, I was 12 years old. You couldn't ask for anything better. It was wonderful. So my parents were lovely. They've both passed on now, but they provided me with a great childhood. Couldn't ask for more.
So you were at CBC for a long time, 33 years approximately?
Well, if you count the year before that, when I was producing a report every day, come up with an idea every day on the weather. Why is it cooler in the Gatineau Hills than it is in the city? Why do leaves change color in the fall? Every day I'd come up with one. And so that year, I mean, they expected results out of me, and they got it. But after that, it was just basically the local weatherman for the most part. For 33 years, yeah, great career.
What's some of your fondest memories? Because that's a long time, and I'm sure I
Yeah,
know you did some crazy stuff back in the day, and even when I
yeah.
worked there.
Well, you remember when I told you we didn't have much what I would call technology back in the day for producing graphics. So a lot of the stuff I did as a kid, back then I was a kid, I would do it. I would bring humor into it. And I would always, they came up with this idea, okay, you're going to go outside and do the weather. So I'd be sort of this community guy, and I would just have fun with it. You know, I remember running into the Ottawa River, shouting "Cowabunga" and diving into the water. Or I introduced humor into it because I didn't have the technology. Once I had the technology, I could talk about weather and show it to you. But back in the day, you didn't have any. I recall doing one week, we did transportation theme. So one day, up I go with the snowbirds. The next day I was on a biplane, which was actually scarier than the snowbirds because it was a really windy day, and we take off from, I think it was the Richmond airport, and we get up about, I don't know, 5-6 seconds up, and all of a sudden, brrr, brrr, I thought we were going down. It was super windy. The guy said, I really shouldn't be going up in the air today. It was, you know, and then the next day would be on a boat and, you know, Dow's Lake or something like that. I would do every community thing, the Greek festival. We used to have the X down at Lansdowne Park, football games, which I would stick around for after, right? So, you know, on the sidelines. So that was I look back on that fondly. You know, I do miss a couple of the things. I miss the people that were there. We had some, I mean, they're the hardest working journalists in the game, and I do miss that aspect of it. I mean, I still see them all, the retirees, but basically, it went by so fast because, you know, every day I wake up and go, what do I get to play with today? You know, my job was great. I'd get there. At about 11, I'd have lunch, do my emails, check the weather, you know, and then I'd go for a walk with the camera. And I was really big on like social media. Someone convinced me to start doing Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. Back in 2012, it had just started. And I said, really? Okay. And it turned out to be a great audience, a big reach. I remember one month getting 8 million views. That was, I think it peaked at just over 8. I had one, my highest view had 800,000 you know, views. It's not as much now, but I can still get 100,000 in a day, depending on if there's storms and stuff like that. So what a job. I mean, I'd go for an hour and a half with a camera in my hand. When the weather was nice, it was great. When it's not so nice, you still got to do it, right? But I had great clothes. The CBC, you know, I had a clothing allowance, not just for suits and ties, but hey, I go outside and I work. We did a show that came up called Our Ottawa, so that was outside. So, you know, I never got cold because I had the best gear in town. And then I'd come back, and then you'd do makeup, and then you'd research. So the real work starts at about 3 o'clock. You research it all, you start putting together your graphics, and I learned that half an hour before the show, stop doing everything. Just stop. You know, maybe go through everything, but you want to go on TV together between your ears. You don't want to be rushing to the last minute, running in and forgetting everything, being all frizzled and you know, forget what you wanted to. That's not the point. The point is the people at home watching it on TV or listening to it on the radio, they want everything. They want you to be prepared, and that's how you do it. You don't rush in at the last second. So I learned that over time. Take half an hour off just before the cameras come on and just get yourself together.
And some people, I mean, people care about it, but some people really care about it. One guy called every day. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, at one point I had, it was called the Neighborhood Watch sort of thing. So I had weather watchers from all over Eastern Ontario and Western Quebec, and every day they would call in or email me with the conditions at where that point was. And so I had this neat little weather watchers. Oh, the storm has hit in Pembroke, but it hasn't hit in Renfrew. And because I had this network of people letting me know, I could pinpoint exactly where everything was, and I could bring that up in the weather. But then we had some consultants come in, and they said that's not what's called a driver to the show. And so that had to stop, and they said, you've got to do this and this and this, as opposed to what you wanted to do. Whatever. It was all based on what the viewer wanted, so I couldn't complain. But I know that, like, I would do a map of across Canada. Here's the temperature if you have relatives in Halifax or in Edmonton or in Vancouver. No, don't do that. It's not a driver to the show. So don't do national, do local. Forecast within an hour of where you live. And it all, I'd say, sure, I'll do it, because it made sense. They'd show me the stats. They'd have focus groups where people would come in. There'd be like 20 of them, and they'd ask them questions. This is what we want. This is what we don't like. So yeah, I'm a big fan of giving the viewers what they want, not what management wants. I'd still sneak it in from time to time, but they didn't like that much.
Because obviously, in the time that you were in it, the industry changed a lot.
It
both
really did.
The weather industry and the TV industry.
Yeah, oh yeah, big time. I would have never thought when I started that I'd be around at the end, what I call the end. I was at the tail end of the glory days, the golden era, 1980s. The 90s technology came, and then after that, it was like, it's all about the phone. As of 2004 or 5. And everything became about the phone. And so where do people get their information? From the phone. Less and less people tune into the radio. Less and less people watch TV. And now you're seeing it where they don't even do weather, per se.
What do you think about that?
It's all about money, I guess. I could see it coming. That's one of the reasons I got out earlier than I could have. I was supposed to work till 65. That's my normal retirement date. But someone once told me that your career at the CBC, it might be the same at other stations, is like a Ferris wheel. You're going up, you're going up, you're going up, and all of a sudden your career, in terms of how management looks at you, starts to go down. And I could see that happening. They didn't want me to do Twitter anymore. They didn't like some of the things I did on my job. They didn't like the way I responded to certain severe weather events. They started, the training goes away. And even if I did get training, I remember getting training on iPhone photos. I could have run the course. And they said, okay, everybody go out and we're gonna do our field stuff now, except for you go do the weather. So that kind of happened. Okay, so you start to see it going down, and the team was leaving. The anchors were going, the sports guy, everyone was leaving. I didn't want to be the last man standing there. That and a couple of other reasons, I said, okay, I'm going to get out of here. I bought myself out. So I could get a small pension, and I said goodbye.
So, I mean, you kind of jumped the gun on me a little bit, because I was going to ask you about the end of CBC in terms of your career there, because I can't tell you the number of people who I've known before, who I've met since. First of all, you're such a huge part of the community. And second of all, there was a little bit of, like, not a mystery, but people are just like, what's the full story? Like, everyone would always ask me, like, what happened with Ian? Like, why was Ian not doing Twitter for a bit? Like you said, why did Ian leave CBC? Yeah. So I just want to, because I feel like you pretty much already said what you want to say, but I just want to sort of give you a final moment. Like,
yeah, with the Twitter, as I said, I was getting in trouble from the wrong manager at the wrong time. That's what happened to me. And this manager, I'm not going to name names, said, we're no longer going to pay you to do Twitter. This was in 2018, I think, 2019. Which was a big shock to me, because it was, why would the CBC say no to any audience? Any audience. Say yes to that, please. Thank you very much.
And like you said, hundreds of thousands of views.
It was a huge audience. And Twitter, or X, whatever it's called, it was ideal for doing weather. And people loved it, and all of a sudden they said, we're not going to pay you for that anymore. So you're not getting any money. We'll let you tweet about a handful of things, like if there's a thunderstorm warning. But if there was going to be an early frost and your garden was going to get ruined, they didn't want me to. Anyway, they were on the process, or it turned out a few years later that they basically got out of it altogether because it wasn't driving people. They had many reasons to do it, none of which I agree with. Social media, you're crazy to get out of it. Crazy to get out of it. As a media outlet, to say no to any audience, I think was just wrong. So anyway, that's when they started taking the money away. And I could see myself going down. This is when I said, I'm out of here. So I stopped doing Twitter. And then I realized, all these people were going, why aren't you doing Twitter anymore? And I couldn't say anything. So I finally said, I think someone from CBC said, Ian's not doing Twitter anymore. And I said, because this manager said, no one's going to care that you're not doing Twitter. Sure. So I said, I can't comment on that. But if you want to talk about it to my manager, you can. And I got in more trouble. And so I finally just said, okay, I got to get out of here. I was supposed to be there for 5 more years. Like I would still be doing it if they had weather. But it was time. It was time to get out, And I haven't looked back. I had a great run. And I'm very appreciative for all the CBC that they did for me. Greatest job in the world. I got to do it. I have no complaints whatsoever. I would just still be doing it if I didn't see that Ferris wheel going down pretty quick.
It's like an athlete, right? Like you don't want to
Go
retire
out, yeah.
on the bottom.
And when you see people doing that, no. Get out while you're good and, you've got that behind you. Don't draw it out.
I will say anecdotally, I don't know if nobody cared about it, but a lot of people, like legitimately, both people who I've known before, people I've met since, friends of my mom who I'm going to dinner with, and they're like, what happened with Ian? Da-da-da. And I'm like, you're telling them that I know, people care. As far as I know anyway. Maybe I'm just wrong on that, but anecdotally.
Yeah, I think this manager might have underestimated the pushback from people. And of course, I couldn't say anything. I'm not allowed to say. I was still employed, and anytime I did say something, I'd get in trouble. And and I'd say, "Oh, sorry," and I'd go and do it anyway, right? So I knew that I couldn't be there anymore. So I got out. But I had no hard feelings at all. I just the way that place can be run sometimes, I question it. And it's even worse for, I think, the people that are there still. They're just getting worked so hard. And, it's not much quality of life, I don't think, for them. Some people love it, I guess, but, it should be fun. It should be rewarding. It should not be some sort of a, stressful, heart-rending, I'm going insane, get me out of here job. It should not be like that. And it's turning into that. And as I said, our audience was like literally dying off because my kids they don't watch TV.
Who has cable?
I do. But
you're the demographic who would have cable.
I'm the last of the, I watch a lot of sports, so I have, and it's just the way I do it. Right?
Those apps are getting better though, the sports streaming apps.
Yeah, I don't watch live sports. So
oh yeah, you PVR a lot.
I PVR a lot of it, or I'll pause it and walk away for an hour, and then when I come back, because I don't watch commercials. That's one of the thing, like with websites, and you say, oh, here's a really neat story. It's a 1-minute story, and you got to watch 45 seconds of ads first? No, thanks. I don't do that. So I'll pay the money for that, and for me, it's worth it.
You're so funny. You're just a funny guy. I will say, just to make this personal for a second, but truly one of the great disappointments of the career I had at CBC was not like me basically being put on leave. Like I'm going to do an episode about this, so I'll talk about it more, but me being taken off the show basically just before you retired. So I missed your retirement. And that honestly is still something that we celebrated together. We had our times, but that is something that I'll always kind of be sad about. Cause I saw Lucy go, I saw so many
Yeah.
of our good friends, right? Dan.
Yeah.
But I wasn't there for you, and that will always bum me out.
Yeah, I was really disappointed with you, Pat. You didn't miss much. I left in the middle of summer, or like June, and that September I'd bump into someone and go, "Oh, I watch you all the time. You're great." Yeah, sure you do. I've been on the air for 6
What was
months.
the last time you watched?
But there was, towards the end, it got. We had the trucker convoy that killed me.
Oh, that was brutal.
You could, you had to take.
COVID.
I live in the middle of nowhere, right? It takes me 15 to 20 minutes to get to a bus that gets me to a train that gets me downtown. It all worked for me. I haven't any, but it's 45 minutes instead of 10 of a commute, and it was harder. You'd step out and that noise. I'll never forget that noise. The smell, the noise. It was bad. I couldn't believe what was going on. COVID did not help at all. 6 months roughly, I was here doing the weather, and it was great. I'd do the weather right over there, and then do the radio. People could hear birds in the background and everything, and then I'd do this lame 30-second, 45-second TV thing sitting in front of my on a milk crate in front of my television.
Hey, I set that up. Okay, it wasn't
Yeah,
that
was
bad.
it?
It wasn't. I helped you set it up. I
Yeah.
helped you.
Anyway,
set it up.
they finally, so I had the honor of having the first remote at-home weathercast, and then I found out that the Good Morning America guy or someone in the States did it that morning, but I'm pretty sure in Canada I was the first. I recall doing the weather outside in a cold winter's day, and the cables all froze, so the microphone, like literally the cables were hard and they froze, so the mic stopped. And this was in the 90s, just after I started, and phones were just coming out. And they had this phone that looked like a World War II walkie-talkie or something, and that's what they looked like back there, these big brick phones. So I was the first guy to do the weather on the phone. At the X, early 90s, they had this...
Yeah, explain for people quickly what the X is, because it doesn't exist anymore, right?
A late summer fair, where they have rides, and it was an agricultural theme to it because it's Eastern Ontario. And they had this, what do you call it, virtual reality. You put on the helmet, okay, and then you'd play games. They were shooting games, really. So I figured out I'd have the helmet on, but lifted it up a little bit so I could do the weather. And then you'd see this meme of me, and I would point to the graphics tonight, tomorrow, the next day. It was all virtual reality. That was a highlight too. There were a lot of highlights. I wish I had thought about them more because you'd have so much fun. I'd have to have a monitor there, right? So I could watch the satellite and talk about it. Okay, the satellite dish, and I'd talk about the weather. And so one time I was at the baseball diamond. It was the Lynx, it used to be called, the team. And just, okay, Ian, you're on in 5 and at 4, and I noticed the monitor's not on. So I reach over and I press the button. I almost got fired. The union did not like me touching the equipment. About 3 years later, everything had changed. I had to clean up after. I was hauling the cable, putting the camera pod on my, what happened to I can't even touch the TV and turn it on. Can you imagine me doing the weather?
It changed a lot while you were there.
It really did. The technology was insane. I remember it was probably around 2000 to 2010 is when the peak of the changes. Everything went digital in the 90s, but for me, 2000 to 2010, everything started changing. Social media, the technology, everything got smaller but faster and better, and then it all became about the phone. So
you're saying once I got there in 2010, everything
all
fell
over.
off. It all fell off, yeah.
Unfortunately, it was downhill.
That's what they told us. I mean, I knew from the first day. They're like, oh, you missed the good times.
Yeah. Well, the good times. The guys, when I was there in the 80s, would tell me about the 70s.
I was going to say, I feel like they always just say the older times were the good times.
Well,
like,
they were telling me stories, and they were...
Smoking in Parliament?
When I started, you smoked at your cubicle. Okay, so
have a drink at your cubicle too?
Well, some did,
yeah,
for sure. But you'd be sitting, because it's all open concept in cubicle, and all you'd see was smoke rising up. And CBC, when I got there, they had just stopped that. This was at CTV, They had stopped that, but they had a smoking room with like pinball and pool, and you'd go in there like if you smoked, and I couldn't stand it because it smelled so bad. It's awful. And then they changed all that. It became, I don't know if the word is woke, but everything changed. You know, they really started. White old guys didn't fit into the mold very much. So I could see it. I understand it. I know it's changing. I'm trying not to be a dinosaur, but you could really between 2010 and 2020, boy, did it get politically correct in a hurry.
Well, I don't think that you're a dinosaur. I think it is true, right? Like the culture shifted in a big way, and it I don't even want to say that it's like the value of someone's merit diminished, but definitely I'm feeling the rain also, so that's why I'm like, oh, I feel it starting to rain.
Wait a second, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah.
That's another thing, people think I control the weather somehow. Ian, I got a wedding on Friday, can you do something? What can I do?
Well, we talked about, you haven't watched the show, but Curb Your Enthusiasm, the weatherman's tip, where the weatherman's always golfing on the days he says it's going to be gross.
Well, because he says it's going to rain.
Clears the course out.
Yeah, he calls him, okay, I want to tee off.
Yeah.
Or there was a movie when Steve Martin was the LA man, I think it was called. He was the weather guy in LA. And every day it's the same weather, right? 355 days of the year. And so the one day where he phones it in and says, oh yeah, another beautiful day. His boss is out on his boat and it gets capsized or something, so we think he gets fired.
You know all the weatherman TV shows, movies?
All the movies. I've got a book on the history of weathercasting.
Oh my God.
Can you believe that?
Well, you said your thesis was on TV
Television
weathercasting.
weather segment. So anything that had anything to do with weather, I've looked at it. I remember to start my company, when I was going to be a consultant, I would go out to all the libraries. I went to the Library of Parliament. I went to the Science Library of the government. Anything there was to do with weather, like some guy wrote an article about TV weathercasting from the Times or something in 1989. I'd read it and I'd photocopy it. So nothing escaped me. I knew everything that was going on in the world of weather, the technology. I could see it changing. I could see it bound to change in the 80s. I could see it. I went to Waterloo. They have a lot of computers. This is like 1983, where it was like Lotus 123 or whatever. The computers were, but they would have. I'd see an artist, and he would do a color table rotation. I went, man, I could use that to do the weather. But I was thinking like that. I could see it changing, and it was just a matter of time before they. I wish I had invented it, but a good idea will move mountains, but yeah, when you're a kid with no money, try and get something happening.
Weather is obviously we're out here today. It's hot. It's maybe raining. I'm not sure, but it's very hot. It's like the first heat wave of the year. It stopped.
Remember?
Yeah, right. You did that. You did do that. It's the first heat wave of like the year for us, really, in Ottawa.
Yeah.
And we're like middle of June. Like it's going to be a hot summer.
Yeah, do you notice how the media likes putting names to things? This is now a heat dome.
Yeah.
It used to be a heat wave. Right. Now it's the heat dome. Or in the winter, it's the polar vortex. Yeah. Media loves hanging things on terms, where it was a cold snap back when I was growing up. Yeah.
Do you think it's kind of ironic that in a time where, not that the weather, not that bad weather didn't happen before, but weather, I think we can say is getting worse. I think that's fair to say.
Well, you could make a point that it's getting more hotter
erratic
earlier, but we've had June heat waves before.
More erratic, though.
They can be earlier. They can be more intense. They may happen later in the season. I find the variability is more.
And more tornadoes. We never really used to have tornadoes, right? I think the weather. I think it's fair to say it's getting worse. That's worse.
We had a tornado about 1,000, 2,000 yards that way. That was that outbreak. What's that? Yeah, I was out of power for like a week.
10 days.
That day was crazy. Power went out here. I was in the basement cowering because tornado warning, and all of a sudden, power goes out. So of course I live in the country, so I've got sump pumps and stuff. So I had to get I didn't do anything at first. I said, oh, it'll come back on. I didn't know, there were 9 or 6 tornadoes or how many there were. We had the ice storm in the 1998. I was out of power for a week. Fortunately, I had a wood stove, so I could survive, but about 3 days into it, the power lines in the front fell down on the ground, and so the firefighters came and knocked on our door and said, you got to get out of here. So my brother took my 2 dogs, and I stayed at a hotel downtown for the duration of the ice storm. The tornado outburst, I remember there was a tornado in Elmer that they sent me to. We've had, the next year we had another tornado down along the Ottawa River. So yeah, we're turning into Tornado Alley. That's the type of thing that's going to change. You're going to get more of everything. Hopefully not more ice storms. That was rough. Yeah. I live in a forest, and my dad had said it looks like you've been buzz bombed. I don't know, it must be a World War II term.
A lot of branches.
Yeah, all the branches fell down. It was awful. I thought it was the end of the world, but you look around now, you can barely tell.
It's a beautiful backyard.
Yeah, it's my own little slice of heaven. It's my own little.
How's life these days? Like everything, you're retired
now?
Well,
let's see. I golfed Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Tomorrow, we're in a tournament Saturday. Any day that ends in Y, I'm golfing. Unless it's going to be really rainy. And when it's this hot, I might take a car, but usually a walk, and it's like 15,000 steps, so I've lost weight, which is nice. And in the winter, I have no problem getting to Christmas. I love it. Autumn here is great. Even November, although it's gray, it's the lead up to Christmas. I love it. But once you get into January, I'm like, okay, get me out of here. So I tend to go down south for a month or so and play golf.
Yeah, we're all very jealous of that. Very jealous.
Well, look, the retirement's not for everyone, but I highly recommend it. It's every day is Saturday.
Honestly, I do think out of the people who I've seen and like the different stories I've seen, like you've transitioned very nicely to retirement. You're living a great life, like your family, everything's good.
Yeah, it's you're not making as much money, but money's not everything, Yeah, it's you do things on your terms when you want to do them. I used to wake up, I still do, wake up every day at 4 o'clock in the morning and, usually lie there for half an hour listening to the comedians or maybe the radio. And then I'll do my social media posting at about 5:30. And then I'll go back to sleep. When I was working, that was hard because you don't go back to sleep. You're getting up to make the kids' lunches and stuff like that. So when you're retired, after this, I'm going to have a nap. Do whatever you want. It's great.
I like to ask people when we sort of wrap up, which we're wrapping up.
No, Pat, say it's not so. We're just getting going. I've got all this interesting stuff to tell you.
You thought we couldn't make it 45 minutes. We're about to be over 45.
Really? Oh, yeah. Sorry, man.
No, you're good.
Motor mouth.
What's something you want to tell people, like people who see this? If it's like you joked about, 200 people, that would be a good number for me. Or 1 person. What's something, you've already laid down a bunch of great advice, I think.
I'd say the same things I would say to the students. I'd say, life is too short. If you can retire, retire. But find something you like doing. It's so important, it really is, because I've never worked a day in my life. Before you came here, I was gardening. That's not work. I've got the headphones on, and, I'm going to go for a swim in the pool. These people who work until the day they die, it's not worth it. Life's short. Enjoy it while you can. You never know what's going to happen tomorrow. So, if you can at all swing it, make it so. Sage advice. I don't know where I got that from. I'm a doughhead.
I love you, man. Thank you. Thank you for talking with me.
My pleasure. Let's go for a swim.
Let's do it.